A planet that needs to provide 50% more energy, 50% more food, 30% more water over the next couple of decades, it simply is not going to happen unless we change the way that we consume.
The circular economy is a fundamentally different economic model. It's taking the entire global economy, looking at it through a different lens and saying, how can we valorize our economy to a higher level? So never at any point would anything made within a circular economy become waste.
In all the systems, we are basically not properly addressing the need for change.
In a circular economy thinking, we actually will recuperate the value of the product when it comes to the end of its life cycle.
Look at the commodity indexes of the last 100 years, we saw that price come down for a century. The problem is those prices have more volatility in them than we've ever seen before in history.
The supply of these polymers are one of the most abundant resources we have on a daily basis. If you use less energy, you use less chemical to produce new material, of course you're going to have financial savings.
This is the largest business opportunity ever seen by our species.
With recurring revenues that come out of a base of customers that will take my product as a service, I can build a very profitable and recurring revenue stream.
It has developed over time exactly into a virtual ownership of the material throughout the whole product life cycle.
What the customer needs to see is personal benefit to them. They've got to walk into a shop, into a store online and see that they buy a product and service that they want. It's sexy, it's aspirational, it's the right price point. And by the way, it's also circular.
With technology, materials, science, the Internet of Things, we can use our innovation and creativity to really build an economy that is more circular. My background isn't in global economics at all, but it's actually in offshore racing. I used to sail solo non-stop around the world, which was a bit crazy. Because when you do that, you take everything you need for your survival for that 3-month journey, and you manage those resources down to the last drop of diesel and the last packet of food. And no experience can ever give you a better understanding of what finite means, because when you're on that boat in the middle of nowhere, what you have with you is all you have. There really is no more. And I'd never translated that understanding of finite that I felt on the boat to anything outside of sailing until I set foot off the boat at the finish line. And I suddenly realised our global economy is no different. It too is dependent on finite resources that we fire through the economy. And since the Industrial Revolution, our speed of use of those resources, which are ultimately finite, has gone up and up and up. A good way to understand the circular economy is to compare it to our current predominantly linear economy, whereby today we take a material out of the ground, we make something out of it, and then ultimately that product that gets made out of it gets thrown away. And we do recycle some of the material from it, but ultimately it's designed for a linear system. Ultimately that product will come to the end of its life. And the circular economy is a fundamentally different economic model. It's taking the entire global economy, looking at it through a different lens and saying, how can we valorize our economy to a higher level? So never at any point would anything made within a circular economy become waste. Everything would be designed so the materials within them can ultimately be valorized, but they can also be kept at their highest utility at all times. A ton of food waste could turn into $6 of heat, $18 of fertilizer and $26 of electricity. Or you could look at timber as being a big piece of wood that's cut down that, yes, you could burn, but you could also build a table out of it. Then you could, at the end of the life of the table, recover that material and turn it into particle board or chipboard, then into particle board, ground down board, and then ultimately at the end of the life of that board, you could then biodegrade it and feed it back into the fertilizer and energy system. One of the things that really struck me on my journey of learning was just looking at basic resource prices. You know, look at the commodity indexes of the last 100 years. We saw that price come down for a century, and then in just 10 years those raw material price decreases were just wiped out. The problem is those prices have more volatility in them than we've ever seen before in history. And a figure that really struck me was that between January 2011 and January 2012, your average European car manufacturer saw a raw material price increase of 500 million euros. Now that's something they have no control over, and in order to make money, they have to buy new raw materials, they need to make vehicles and sell them. And so much of the strategy around protecting companies from resource volatility was around being efficient. And you talk to chief executives and they'd say, our goal is to be more efficient with the way we make our products. So we use 10% less material, we use 10% less energy every year. That's to make us less exposed to those volatile prices. But actually, if you pan that out 10 years, does that mean that in 10 years you make nothing with nothing and have no employment? That does buy you time, which of course is vital in the transition. But the fascinating fact for me was in the transition to what could actually work. There is often circular activity already in existence within the business. So sometimes the first step is identifying that circularity and then building on that. So for example, with Renault, with whom we've worked now for many years, they already had remanufacturing. They already had this incorporated into much of their design. But when you look at it as a whole systems approach, rather than the design of the cars here or the remanufacturing being something separate, you suddenly end up with a systemic change that can happen through the whole business. The role of the circular economy is not trying to improve what we have at the end of the pipe through a lot of consumer engagement or recovering higher values of materials from what we have in the economy today, but it's going to the beginning of the pipe and it's building a system that can really run in the long term. So it's working with businesses, with regions, with governments, and ultimately at the end with individuals to build a system whereby people have the choice to switch to more circular models. You could ask the question, how would you get people to switch to more circular models? How would you get them to buy more circular products? And I think them understanding what the words circular economy mean are irrelevant. You don't really need them to. If you shift your mobile phone contract from being buying the phone and then when you get the next one, you throw the old one away or you resell it into secondary markets, if that contract shifted to being a performance contract where every year you got a brand new phone, but you just happen to send the old one back to the system, what we've seen from the studies is we get a better phone more regularly and the manufacturer or the service provider knows that phone will go back in so they can equally valorize it. So it tends to be a win-win situation. Doesn't need to say circular economy anywhere on it. It's just a better value proposition. I think some interesting things to bear in mind if you're looking at shifting your business from linear to more circular. One would be what circular activity already exists within your business. And in most cases we've looked into that already exists and how can you build on that and communicate on that throughout the business so people understand the direction of the business. Another question would be how resilient is your business in a world where we have more price volatility than we've ever seen before in history? And indeed, what is your opinion on how circularity can make you a more resilient business and can isolate you through having those resources, having those products cycling at a higher level within the business? I think systemic change within the business, so bring all the parties on board. This can't just be a question to discuss with the design team, but it's the marketing team, it's the financing team, it's everyone within that business. People just seem to understand that. They understand the reorientation of the business, they understand it delivers more value, and that really helps people to get on board the understanding that this is systemic change, it's not just one department.
Traditionally, the business model was I make the product, I sell it to you, you use it and you discard it. In a circular economy thinking, we take a different notion. We actually will recuperate the value of the product when it comes to the end of its life cycle. We can either repurpose or refurbish the product for another use cycle, or we can recuperate the raw materials from the end product and recycle them so that we can build another product. In circular economy business models, I would like products to come back to me as the original designer and manufacturer. And once you get your head around that notion, why would I actually sell you the product if you are primarily interested in the benefit of the product? And maybe I can stay the owner of the product and just sell you the benefit as a service. If you carefully look around us and we look at other companies, there are plenty of examples where circular economy thinking is applied. Aircraft engines are often made by Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce has a business model where they stay the owner of the engine and make sure that they sell aircraft flying hours. I would love this to become further ingrained, and not only for B2B business models, but also for B2C business models. In the circular economy thinking, people in the company have to start thinking differently. That applies to marketing, product design, but also to management, especially to management. Because how do you measure profitability in a circular model? The initial cost price of a product that is circular can actually be a little bit more expensive because it's designed to take the modules back and to recoup the value at the end of its first life. That means that you need to measure profitability maybe over an 8 or even 15-year time frame. And if the product is 5% more expensive initially, but I get 30% of the value back after 8 years, then that's a great proposition. right? But it does require us to have a long cycle in judging the value of a customer relationship and a business model. I often get questions whether circular economy thinking is understood by shareholders. And I dare say, if we do a good job, yes, shareholders understand it and even can appreciate it. And why is that? Well, shareholders actually like to have predictable results. And if I build up my business with recurring revenues that come out of a base of customers that will take my product as a service rather than only, the hit and run of the linear model, I can build a very profitable and recurring revenue stream. And shareholders like that. So initially, the reaction may be, let's focus on the quarter, let's focus on the next half year. But long-term investors, value investors, are interested in understanding how the company builds up a recurring revenue stream, which fits perfectly well with the circular economy thinking. Philips is the leader in energy-efficient lighting, but energy-efficient lighting is a little bit more expensive, maybe up to 30–40% more expensive than traditional lighting. And that puts customers off. We went to Schiphol with a proposition where they can buy lighting as a service. That takes away the initial adoption barrier. It saves the Schiphol airport 50% of their electricity bill. It gets them a product that lasts up to 75% longer, so they have less replacement cycles and they save labor. And it gives us a relationship with Schiphol Airport that will last many years. It actually reduces my selling expenses and it continues that ongoing business partnership. All in all, this deal was very profitable, both for Schiphol Airport as well as for Philips. In healthcare, we design and make medical scanners, often, $500,000 to $1 million a piece. And there's a lot of very valuable parts in a scanner like that. Nowadays, we design so that we can recoup later on from our customers these machines. We take them all back and then in our refurb factory we repurpose them and we make them almost as new and we can sell them to other customers. From a design perspective, we had to design the product so that it would be easy to take it apart, that certain modules would indeed, as the word says, be modular and they can be reused in the second life of the scanner. My recommendation for those of you who are considering to embrace the circular economy thinking in your business is to assemble a few people, marketing, R&D, manufacturer, sales, and have a workshop where we clear the plate, we open the mind and say, what is it that we really offer to our customers? I think you will be surprised on how inspiring that session is going to be. How much energy will be unlocked through that, brainstorm. And I would also advise you to involve your customers. What are they really after from you? What do they value in you? Is it the product or is it the benefit of the product? It took Philips 15 years to get where we are. So don't think that, this is a solution overnight. You will grow into it, I'm sure.
The circular economy is an economic system that's an innovation engine that puts the back into resources. It allows for continuous benefit to be provided to all generations by the reuse of things, of material, energy, water, by designing things that can become useful over and over again. This is the largest business opportunity ever seen by our species. And the leaders in the economic future will be people who understand that by design we can create perpetual assets and optimize them to create businesses that thrive and are enjoyed by people everywhere, all the time, forever. Why would we want to miss that? We see two nutrient cycles today. One is the biological nutrient cycle, which is the ancient one of life itself, but the other is probably about 5,000 years old, which is technical nutrition, when we started, chipping rocks or banging metal. So if we start with the biological nutrient system, these are things that come from life and go back to life. So if we look at the biological cycle of fabric, we could design it instead of what we saw in the early 90s, where you saw wool and Ramey blends that would have their trimmings declared hazardous waste by the Swiss government, and they had to be sent to Spain for burial or incineration because they couldn't be buried or burned in Switzerland. We can redesign that to eliminate the concept of waste. So in the case of textiles, we'd redesign the textiles to become trimmings that are mulch for the local garden club and grow strawberries, and the water coming out of the textile mill is as clean as Swiss drinking water. This reduced costs by 20% and allowed a textile industry to stay in Switzerland. That is designed for the circular economy. On the other hand, there are technical nutrients, the camera that takes this, or the computer that you're watching this on. These are technical nutrients. These are materials that we can design for endless reuse. A really fabulous example of technical nutrition is aluminum. In the last 150 years, pretty much 75% of all the aluminum made by humans and used is still in use. And so it is exactly what we talk about in technical nutrition. It can be a window, it can be a piece of furniture, and it's valuable, it's collected, it's reused ad infinitum. That's a great example of a technical nutrient. Engaging with circular economy by design is fascinating. If we look at different sectors, we realize that a lot of people will say, this is a very interesting theory, but how does it work in practice? Buildings that I get to do, because I'm an architect, is design the River Rouge plant for Bill Ford, where we replaced hard asphalt roofing with green roofs, the largest in the world, but we ended up saving Ford $35 million in capital expense day one over conventional stormwater management. For business people, this is a 1-minute decision. Another example would be in the furniture industry. We see the companies like Steelcase and Herman Miller designing for disassembly where all the materials are designed for reuse, because this way we harvest yesterday's products for tomorrow's products. In personal care and home care, we see companies like Aveda and Method in personal care, and then soaps and things like that, where all the materials are designed to be safe in the water as they're used, safe on your skin, and even the packaging is considered as nutrients for the next cycle of packaging. So we can add all kinds of products to these lists, and just about any company can engage with these issues in a very profitable way. Peter Drucker, the management consultant, pointed out in 1984 in his book, The Effective Executive, on page 1, that it's a manager's job to be efficient and do something the right way, but it's the executive's job to do the right thing. Executives can work from their values to produce value. And one of the problems, as we see today, if you only start with numbers and value, you can go to tactics, you can go to strategies and set measurements and goals, but you're benchmarking. And your business may be changing while you weren't paying attention, and you're benchmarking against yesterday instead of advancing into tomorrow. So we find that it's very powerful for executives to start with their values, because you've gone beyond benchmarking to what does the future look like that you intend, and how do you design into it? And then we give it to the engineers and produce the value. So let's say you're a CEO and you want to join the circular economy. What do you do? Well, the first thing is to take an inventory and see what it is you're doing and understand which parts of it are not good and which ones are good and where you want to go. And then we're going to articulate what we do want for the future. And you're going to do both at the same time. Let's get rid of the things we don't want. Let's increase the things we do want. And my goal is 100% fabulous. That is what executives can do. That's leadership.
Around the globe, we have more and more regulations in the end-of-life situation on manufacturers, where they have to take care, according to extended producer responsibility, of the products in end-of-life. So when there are collection targets and the producer has to prove that he has taken care of properly of a certain amount of products, he has the obligation of also taking back the products. Supply chain innovation is the part of looking at reverse not as a must in the way of I'm obligated, I have warranty returns, I need to take care of that. It's much more looking at how can reverse be an enabler for me. On the one hand, yes, I have to fulfill obligations, I have to take care of environmental treated things, but at the same time to say, I want my products back because it has value to me to get them back from a material recovery perspective, maybe. If the material recovery is not the point, it could be also parts harvesting and for my repair channels and everything to get value out of these streams and reuse products in my own streams and controlled way again, not leaving it to others to do that in an intransparent mode maybe. We're always looking into what else is around that reverse process and how can you use reverse to enhance your business models overall. And to think about, well, if a customer wants to return something, if it's a consumer out there, I have a touch point with the consumer that gives me much, much more possibilities than only saying, well, he's got a defective product and he wants to return it. So it's about how can I enhance customer experience through a good service. Motivation initially was become more independent from primary raw material streams through reusage of material out of end-of-life products that are out there and that I have delivered into the market myself. It has developed over time exactly into a virtual ownership of the material throughout the whole product life cycle. A limitation today in this process again is you don't know where your products are, you don't know how many you will be able to collect back. Changing business models from not selling products anymore, but renting products out, looking into pay-per-use models, will create a total new dynamic out in the market and create an enormous need for reverse processes. Asset tracking in the way of having one product identified with like a serial number, but then having the additional information of saying, I know where it went to, I know at which location it is today, I know who is using my product, I most probably even know for what it is being used in that situation. So is it a consumer that has a computer, for example, only in his home, or is it a business that is using my product out there under a certain condition and for a certain time? And then the asset tracking again of saying, I have a lease, a rental agreement behind that with my consumer, and I know when that runs out. So I know exactly the point of time when I will get that product back. It will make overall products cheaper because we have a plannable situation and we know how to recover the value out of the products. Even if it is only material recovery as the lowest level of recovery that we're looking at, still you can fully optimize that process, and you even have an incentive as a manufacturer of saying, how do I design my product? Because I know I will get it back and I will get the benefit at an end of life. The total cost of reverse activities that are done as of today are mostly not visible because they're all spread out in an organization. You have part of it that is captured in the sales department and taking care of these things. You have other parts that are run by the service department. And then finally you have people taking care of compliance. Only very rarely we see companies that have pulled that all together and have a full understanding of their total cost. So through this they also don't see, well, how can I really optimize? Factors to shifting it into greater volume and through this achieving scale are on the one hand consumer behavior, on the other hand manufacturers understanding that it makes sense to increase volume and to take products back and incentivize the return of products even as of today, even if they don't have a full cradle-to-cradle concept or a full closed loop, already as of today thinking about what are the advantages of bringing it back, and through this scaling it by incentivizing returns. First of all, it has to be a strategical element. Looking at reverse not as a must, looking at reverse as an opportunity to integrate it in your own business concepts and through this open new roads of interaction. It is about customer retention. It is about a brand recognition and all of these strategic elements where a business leader should think about, yes, how can I differentiate myself through reverse activities compared to others, and through this get a business advantage. Another part is thinking about out of the box. Reverse works differently. Structure your process outside of your forward processes, and then see where are the interconnections that you need to build it up, to then finally get to the point of saying also my systems are a closed loop.
Upcycling is actually recycling old material and turn that into something new. Only in the last 100 years, we forgot about this way of efficiently used material. So even in Roman times, they used the food packaging like amphora, the terracotta packaging, to use as building material for aqueducts, to fill the cement. The spolia in the Renaissance, they took the old classical Roman marble columns to build the churches. The Chinese use rice husk as a reinforcement, a glue, natural glue for the cement, to build a ram earth foundation and for Great Wall of China. In modern context, for example, this water bottle that we're very familiar with on a daily basis. In any urban economy, you got water being packaged this way. This is PET, this is PP. Even these two raw material are actually single material. They can be separated mechanically, and these are literally one of the most abundant resources we have on a daily basis, and the resources is actually ever increasing. The supply of these packaging materials, these polymer, actually are perfectly good to be reused in the second life or the third life. E-waste recycling is the next trend of huge amount of trash resources that's coming in. First of all, it has huge amount of precious metal that's in any electronic waste. Traditionally, that's what people collect. Many developing nations are collecting electronic waste and open burn them. This is the most toxic way of extracting precious metal. So we collaborated with SDTI, one of the big e-waste recycler in Asia, and they are actually doing mechanically e-waste recycling. So they're basically chopping them down and separating the metal and the plastic out. Okay, so now all of a sudden you have instead of burning the electronic waste, now you have the metal part, then you also have the plastic part. The plastic are actually quite precious in the electronic waste, alongside, of course, with gold, platinum, silver. Those are, everybody knows that's valuable. But the waste plastic in electronics are very high grade, like polycarbonates, like CDs. Even in the electronic waste recycling, there's a lot of leftover material that you cannot use at the current system. So, for example, like the circuit board, you will have lots of epoxy, lots of short chain glass fiber after the recycling. These materials normally are really bad if it's go into the air or the incinerator. So what we're trying to do is take that. These are naturally fireproof ingredients or aggregates. We're using that for building material. We're actually using that for sun shading facades. So the whole system is naturally fireproof because of, just imagine, sand and glass. It doesn't really burn. So that project is about demonstrating, first of all, the mechanical e-waste recycling at a different scale, massive campus scale. And the other is obviously using the least amount of carbon footprint, taking the waste of an e-waste recycling and turn that into something that's useful for building applications. One of the biggest challenge we have is that people overestimate the risk. They worry that whether the consumer is going to take recycled material. The designer overestimated the risk of using recycled material too within this linear supply chain because they're not familiar with it, they're not comfortable, they're used to traditional material that achieve a certain consistency. On the supply end, it's also difficult because people overestimated the risk of integrating recycled material into the manufacturing. There's a fear, okay? There's an overestimated risk and fear that doing sustainable recycled material it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be more costly. The cost of recycling, it's the energy required. So the price of recycled material can definitely be cheaper than virgin material, 100%. Without the desire by the leadership of corporate leaders to push down the supply chain, it's almost impossible for any of this closed loops concept to be executed. Because without that forward thinking or a long-term thinking, strategic thinking of the leadership, it's really difficult for that urgency to trickle down all the way down to the material supply. And to prove to the leadership that the circular economy works. One, financially it has to be lower than the existing, whatever you're procuring right now. If you just recycle existing resources or trash resources that's out there in the market, post-consumer or post-production, doesn't matter. But in general, you will have tremendous carbon saving. The energy footprint you embedded into the new production, if you use recycled material, is at least 60% to 80% less. If you use less energy, you use less chemical to produce new material, of course you're going to have financial savings. The supply of trash is growing by 70% a year. You know, this is crazy, okay? So just imagine you have a raw material supply source that's potentially going to keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. I don't see how you can increase costs. You're going to have lower costs in the long run. The second is has to have higher performance. You want to make trash material very desirable. It has to have better performance. It has to be sexier. It has to be even more interesting than the existing product offering. Okay, so you kind of create a pole with recycled material. Okay, on the marketing design side. The third is definitely also a strategic level for the management. You got to think about the future of innovation process. It's going to deal with transparencies. It's going to deal with accountability. It's also going to deal with this matrix-based thinking, the cross-disciplinary innovations. By using closed-loop economy and as a way to instigate your own team or creative teams to groom a set of creative professionals internally within the company to deal with this new way of thinking, new innovation within the supply chain, I think you're going to optimize the system further. You can even make your company even more efficient. And that is both in the midterm and long run, it's going to be very beneficial for any corporations.
Whenever you talk about the major change in the society, in the economy, of course, it will have to be connected with the change of the market. Prices do not reflect the right costs on the market today. Some of the production factors like capital are more rewarded than the others. So in essence, we are dealing with a lot of market failures, which we have to address. Our business leaders, CEOs, are rewarded basically on a yearly or even on a quarterly accounts. It's giving wrong signals on the market. There are various parts of the world which has understood that message better and faster than the others. Why? Because they have been more exposed. Japan is one of those areas. In Japan, already in the year 2000, they have proposed first legislative proposals. So today, 98% of the metals are basically returned back to the cycle. In Germany, in the recent years, they have started very seriously with the resource efficiency policy. In China, the 12th five-year plan was already including the issues which are connected to the circular economics. It's very important that those things are not done ad hoc, that they are basically addressed in a systemic way, so that we prepare properly and in a holistic way the market incentives and price questions, cost questions, subsidies questions, public procurement questions. All those are really, really important, serious public policies through which you can give a proper signal that an economy moves into the right direction. Whenever we talk about the outlook of the policies in the circular economy, I think it's important to understand that each and every policy actor will have to contribute. Having a kind of agreement on the global level, having a level playing field created, it's really important, because this is removing the possibility of anybody that it will say, why us, why not the others? Going then to, for example, European Union level, here you have to handle part of the policies which could be dealt on that level. For example, waste policy or definition of the product policy. But some of the policies cannot be dealt also on that level. They should be dealt on the national basis level, for example, tax policies or education policies. And finally, the real implementation, of course, happens then in the cities and in the local levels. Governments create framework conditions, but at the end of the day, the change has to be done through economic activity, which is providing us with the life which we have, and that is business sector. And that's why the partnership between the business sector and the policymakers is here extremely important. It's really important that those lock-ins which are currently hampering us from moving to a new stage of the development are properly addressed. In too many cases, we protect the unprotectable from the development perspective. One of the typical examples of the lock-ins is, for example, investments which were done in the past in the waste incineration. So today we have few countries in the European Union who are practically not landfilling anymore. They have high level of incineration, which is actually energy recovery from waste. All those countries today have a bit of problem of introducing higher level of recyclability. That's a typical case of a lock-in where something you have invested in the past, it's not allowing you, because the interests are connected with that you would really do the necessary change which is advisable. Lock-ins which are connected with the infrastructure existing, lock-ins which are connected with business models, lock-ins which are connected with financing models. In all the systems, we are basically not properly addressing the need for a change. Obviously, the circular economy, it's not only protecting the environment, it's also a serious business case. Understanding that the existing business model, it's unsustainable, but not only from environmental point of view, from the pure economic point of view, it's extremely important. If you take that into account, you are opening new investment opportunities, you are opening new innovation potentials, and that's where the business leaders and business is the best. Sooner you see that opportunity, earlier you are on the market. And of course, those who are the first comers in the market are always rewarded. So be the voice of the change.
Ultimately, the consumer is vital to the circular economy. They're the ones driving the consumption of trillions of individual items around the planet. iPhones, food, clothing. And that consumption is only going to grow as a burgeoning middle class in the developing world comes on stream as well. We have to find a different way of servicing those needs. A planet that needs to provide 50% more energy, 50% more food, 30% more water over the next couple of decades, it simply is not going to happen unless we change the way that we consume. There will be a lot of solutions that lie behind the scenes, business to business, in supply chains the consumer never sees. But ultimately, we have to get consumers to think differently about products and services. And consumers will only join us in this journey if they can see the benefits to them personally. If all we talk about is abstract benefits to the planet, less waste, less climate change, less deforestation, of course that matters to them. They care. But we also need to overlay it with the fact that you personally will benefit. This will be faster, it will be cheaper, it'll be more aspirational. And if you can link those two worlds of better for planet and people with better for you, the individual consumer, you'll win and people will adopt circular economy principles with scale and authority. So we listen to our customers all the time, not just in terms of product, in terms of price, the look of our stores, but also in terms of sustainability. And what's happening is that 10% of them are telling us they're passionately green. They will pay extra for a fair trade or organic product, but it's 10%. 20% of them are telling us they're not interested at all. Usually the poorest sections of a society, they've got other preoccupations, focusing on getting through the week for their family. And then there's two interesting groups in the middle, 35% each. 35% light green. They are very concerned about the future. They want to participate in change, but they want it to be easy. They don't want it to cost more. They don't want to have to sacrifice their lifestyle of today. If we can put it on a plate for them and help them to get involved, they will. And then there's a second group of 35%, a little bit more disheartened. What difference can I make, little or me, on my own? And what that group's looking for is leadership. If all I have to do is one small thing this week, but billions of other people all do that one small thing, that's a big difference. I believe customers are absolutely at the heart of the circular economy, but I make the qualification they've got to see the personal benefit as well as the wider environmental one as well. Customers are very demanding. They expect everything off a business. They want great prices, they want great looking stores and websites, they want really aspirational products that make a difference to their lives. And they increasingly want it done in an ethical, transparent way. But they're not willing to pay more for any of those things. What the customer needs to see is personal benefit to them. They've got to walk into a shop, into a store, online and see that they buy a product and service that they want. It's sexy, it's aspirational, it's the right price point. And by the way, it's also circular. So for me, Tesla's a great example of what success looks like. An aspirational product that everybody would want to own and to drive, but all in a way that is fundamentally better for the environment as well. Put those two worlds together, better for the consumer, better for the planet, and you've got success. The customer of today has got infinite choice. They can go out there on the street online and buy any product, anywhere, at any price. So one of the most important things that business needs to think through in the 21st century is how do you build lifetime customer loyalty? In the past, it was just built upon ease and convenience. Your shop just happened to be closer to their home than anybody else's. Today, that's irrelevant. People can reach past it with the internet. They can find anything, anywhere. So one of the most important parts of circular business models for business is to think through how do you build that lifetime loyalty? How do you get people to keep bringing back, buying a new product and service from you in returning the old one? So there's some really exciting opportunities for business leaders who can use this new, brave circular economy to also solve a big business solution today, customer loyalty. There are many challenges about running a circular clothing model in the future. You have to think about all that clothing you might get back. Now, some of it you can reuse to make clothing, but I don't think there'll ever be a situation where Marks & Spencer can literally sell 120,000 tonnes of fibre in 350 million garments and get 120,000 tonnes back to reuse in every single piece of clothing it sells in the future. It will never be that neat. We need to create partnerships with others, whether it's Oxfam working to resell our clothing, other technology companies who can turn our clothing that we recover into something totally new. So you can imagine Marks & Spencer wool suits coming back. We'll make new wool suits out of them, but some of it might go to the airline industry to make carpets. Some of it might go to farmers to create composting materials. Some might go to the building industry to create loft insulation. So you have to work to build these horizontal partnerships beyond your own business model. So the role of a business like Marks & Spencer in the circular economy is very important. We're an aggregator ourselves. We've got a supply chain of thousands of different manufacturers, tens of thousands of farmers and raw material producers, most of whom don't know each other, yet we know them all. So we have got to look down with a helicopter view across the totality of our value chain and say, you've got a waste over there that somebody else over here could use. You didn't know that? Let me put you together and you can sort of innovate and bring a product to marketplace. So we have got to be that leader at aggregating our value chain. But then we've also got to be a leader at reaching beyond our immediate sector, retail, and supply chains that we know so well, food and clothing, to reach out into other sectors as well. And that does require a different business discipline. Rather than being very inward-looking, focusing on just your business model, you've also got to be out there scanning opportunities, meeting people from different sectors who traditionally might have been seen not relevant to me. But now there's a world of opportunity from those businesses that can make those connections with the wider economy all around them. For any business executive, I've got three pieces of key learning. The first is customer. Absolutely put them at the heart of your thinking about the circular economy. There are many solutions that lie behind the scenes, business to business. But ultimately, we have to think about the products and services we sell to billions of consumers, trillions of items today that we have to change. The customer has to see the benefit of the circular economy to them personally as much as the wider planet and society. My second piece of learning is all about culture. You've got to get your business to look outwards as much as inwards. The solutions to the circular economy do not lie within your own organisation by and large. It's about collaborating with NGOs, with other businesses from other sectors, with civil society to find solutions. So you must create that culture of outward lookingness. And the third piece of learning is all about scale. You will not solve this alone. You cannot expect to create a little green oasis in a desert called a failed economy of society. You have to work with others. Our work at Marks & Spencer with the Consumer Goods Forum, with the World Economic Forum, has been vital. We have learned from working with so many other organisations. We've had the scale of voice to drive the change that we need. From Walmart to Nestle to Unilever to Coca-Cola to Tesco's, all these organisations are putting their shoulder to the wheel as well, and together we're stronger for it.